Check, check, check.
Okay.
Hello? Is this thing on? Okay. Well, today we're going to be talking about our trip to the mountains. Yay! The thing with winter backpacking is everything is so much heavier and you have so much more stuff and you have hats and gloves and thicker things and all of your down is thicker and everything's more heavy. So we have been chipping away at hiking the Appalachian Trail in Virginia, doing section by section. So this time we decided to hike from, I guess, Maupin Field up to Rockfish Gap. The cool thing, I guess, was that we were expecting snow, but we didn't know how much snow. There was a forecast between half an inch to 8 inches. You know, the mountains are the mountains and you gotta kind of roll with it, and you don't really ever know what you're gonna actually get once you're out there, right? So we went for it, and so what we did, we parked at Reed's Gap, and then it's about a 2-mile hike up to Maupin Field. So the first day was pretty uneventful. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward 2-mile hike up and over this kind of like little buddy of a mountain, and then you kind of hike down to Maupin Field. We've camped there. This would be our third time camping there, so we're pretty familiar with it. When we got there, there was a couple other guys there, and you know, we're always I guess amazed at when we think we're doing something dumb and going backpacking in the wintertime, we kind of have the expectation that we're the only idiots that are going to be out there. But it's kind of comforting to know that there are other idiots out there who enjoy doing the same things that we do. So that night was pretty cool. Hung out by the fire and kind of went to bed. And then, you know, it kind of just sounded like rain all night. But we woke up and there was kind of like a dusting on the ground. I kind of said that it looked like frosted mini wheats on the ground. We like to kind of take our time in the morning. We're not like get up, set alarms. We kind of wake up whenever. And then in the wintertime, we kind of have an unspoken rule of first man up kind of starts a little fire. So it's just nice to have that little fire in the morning to kind of keep your hands warm while you're filtering water and making breakfast and getting ready. You can kind of do stuff and your fingers get chilled and you kind of go warm them back up by the fire and stuff like that. So we hung out and set on our way, and
You miss your kids.
you know, the next day, that second day was not a horrible hike. There was certain areas that were maybe a little bit like snowy and like whatever, but the snow wasn't really that bad. What was annoying was the wind. So the wind was kind of unrelenting all day. The air temperature was about 29 degrees, and then the wind was, I don't know, anywhere between like 15, 20, maybe more than that, like with some bigger gusts and stuff, but it was like a pretty constant, like 10, 15 mile per hour wind. I would say with the wind chill, like it was probably in the like low 20s for air feel and for the real feel. So it was pretty, I wouldn't say brutal, but it was not like warm. So we definitely hiked, you know, had to hike with gloves and a hoodie and another shirt underneath that, and you're constantly like pulling hoods up and taking them off and taking on your gloves and putting them on. You're like, you kind of do that dance all day, and you're kind of cold when you're in the wind and then not so cold when you're out of the wind, and you know, it was just a lot of that all day. So we had about 6 miles of just kind of like skirting along the side of this mountain, and you know, we weren't up on the ridge, but we were kind of like in the wind all day. The way the wind was coming, we're going north and the wind was coming from the north, so we're kind of like in and out of it all day, mostly in it though.
Yikes!
All right, I guess we're going this way. Hope so. And so we got about 6 miles and we got to a spot called Dripping Rock, which is where we knew that there was a water source that could have been the last water source as we hiked up to the spot where we were going to camp. And so this was probably the only part of the trip that was really kind of like an eye-opening experience for both of us. And so we're sitting there eating our lunch, and we decided to stop on the side of the road and just kind of eat there. And the issue was the wind was kind of coming straight at us that whole time. So we're sitting there eating, getting kind of like hit by the wind. You know, I had on a puffy and gloves and everything, but it was still super cold. So we just kind of crushed our food as fast as we could. And then we had to filter water. So here's where it got kind of sketchy. We filtered the water, and out of the dripping rock, it's more or less literally dripping. So it took us a while. Your hands get wet. And like in the mornings when we have our fires and stuff to kind of warm up our hands, we didn't have that. And so both of us got our hands incredibly numb to the point where it's like numb and painful. If it's ever happened to you, it sucks. And so we both kind of were filtered, and we both just left our puffies and like all of our stuff on that we were warming up for lunch. And we were like, we got to get out of here. So we just started hiking. So we put on our packs and took off. And it was incredibly painful. And so my hands were just completely numb. And so I was kind of walking, just holding my trekking poles and kind of like making fists, trying to get the blood flow in my hands going. And as we started going up, my body kind of regulated and I started to warm up, where I think both of us started feeling kind of like nauseous. And, you know, I think we both experienced some minor symptoms of our bodies starting to go into shock from the cold and then the hot, and then, you know, all those elements coming together. And, you know, what's amazing is how fast that happens. And you really have to be careful when you're out in the cold like that, because you think you're fine. And then the next minute you're like freezing, your hands are numb, and you gotta just press on. And, you know, luckily everybody was good. You know, we took a break, we kind of hunkered down behind a rock, chilled for a couple minutes, and then kind of pressed on. And so this climb was kind of the most difficult of the day so far. And we kind of because you kind of just go up to the top of, I guess, what would be Humpback Rock. So you're kind of going up towards Humpback Rock. And so the whole time we're going up, the wind is just still whipping. The wind is unrelenting. It's just continuous, like it's nonstop. And so every once in a while you'd kind of turn a bend and kind of get a break from it. But then the very next bend, you'd be right back into it. And so we finally get up to where the campsite is, and it's dope. Like, it's a really cool spot. There's like really cool views and it's really pretty, but it's super windy. And at this point, you know, both of us were feeling good physically. At that point, we had kind of gotten over whatever happened at lunchtime. And so we both kind of like sat there for a second and you kind of timed the wind, and it was just, the wind was just coming through. There was nowhere for the wind to get blocked. Like, there was nowhere to go. There was no big rocks or trees or anything to kind of block the wind from anything. So had we stayed there, we would have had to just kind of tough that out from about 2 o'clock in the afternoon for the rest of that day until we hiked back down. So what we decided to do was, we knew that, or had heard that there were a couple more camp spots along the way. So we were like, well, let's just keep going. And if we find a really great campsite close by, we'll just stop there, you know, if it's out of the wind, and we'll just kind of hang out for the day. So what ended up happening is we just kind of kept going, and there weren't really any other campsites that we could find until maybe it was another like 2 or 3 miles. Like, we had already passed the Humpback Overlook, and by this time, you know, we had already gone maybe 3 or 4 miles. By that time, I think both of us kind of knew we were just going for the shelter. Like, it had, by the timing of it was going to have us getting into the shelter like just at sunset. So we wouldn't need to be doing like any night hiking or anything like that. So it was more or less fine. But when you kind of come up and over humpback, you're kind of coming down and it's just these really long, drawn out switchbacks, and you're just kind of coming down, and then it's another one, and it's just seemingly never ending switchbacks. And then once you kind of come down to a spot, then you kind of hike up this like what seems to be like an old like riverbed, stream bed or something like that, until you kind of come back down around, and then it's just more switchbacks all the way down to the shelter. And so by the time we got to that second set of switchbacks, we had caught up to and passed the guys that left the shelter the night before. So those guys camped at the shelter and they were doing the 16 miles straight through. And so we caught up to them and kind of passed by them and made some jokes about, starting a fire and stuff when we get there. But, it was like that last like 2 or 3 miles was just, I don't want to say brutal, but we were hungry. We were cold. We knew we were close. You could see the shelter, and then you're going through the switchbacks and you could see the shelter off in the distance across the valley there. And then you would come down and you would kind of like go way past it, and then you come back, then you would come back towards it and it would be a little bit closer, and you'd switch back and you would lose sight of it. So we were kind of like, how's this going to work out? But everything worked out fine. We got to the shelter. There was 3 people that hiked down from Rockfish that were at the shelter that had a big fire set up my hammock just enough, like put it up, and then put up my tarp. Didn't really like set it for the night, but just kind of put it all up and got everything organized, and then just immediately put on all of my clothes and went and sat by the fire and ate dinner before going back and setting everything back up. But that night was pretty good. We had a really great fire. There was a bunch of people at that shelter. By that time there was like 7 of us at the shelter, which is just crazy that there's that many people, because that second night was supposed to be even colder. But the most important part was that we were out of the wind at that point. So because where the shelter is down in between like the armpit of 2 mountainsides coming together, we were out of the wind. I had 3 blisters. I had 1 on each foot that were pretty good size, and then my left foot had like another small one on the inside. And I'm not sure if it was the 16 miles, because we were kind of getting it too, so we hiked a fast 16 miles, or my shoes were new and I had never really hiked that far in my shoes. I just got some new topos. We slept great. There's this great stream / river that kind of like runs through that shelter area, so there's plenty of water, and just that sound of the river all night was great. We both slept like babies that night, and we woke up the next morning. Again, we did our thing, just kind of woke up whenever. Usually it's around 7-8 o'clock when our bodies get us up, and then we got our stuff together, made our little fire, ate our breakfast, cleaned everything up, packed up, and hiked out. And it was a somewhat easy 5 miles out, but because you kind of come down into that little crook, then we got to kind of go back out. So it's immediately back up to more switchbacks. So you kind of hike up more switchbacks to get out of it. But then after that, it's pretty easy, but it is 5 miles. We were not going very fast. We kind of just took our time. We had the day, and it was once we got back up, the wind kind of came back, and it was pretty breezy and a bit chilly. But even though that day was warmer and we were kind of in the sun, there were points where we would be in the sun and we couldn't feel the wind, and you get kind of warm, but then again you turn a corner and there's the wind and everything, and it was just unrelenting right up until getting back to the car. Like getting back to the car, you kind of come up back to where Interstate 64 is, and you come up and it's just whipping right through there. And so that last like 10th of a mile was just super windy and crazy and just not very comfortable. But all in all, I think it was a good trip. There was definitely some type 2 fun moments, but for the most part, I think we got our fix in for the winter time. After that, both of us kind of like my feet were kind of hurting. Chris's knee was kind of hurting the next day. So I'm glad that we made it through and everything was cool. But we both joked afterwards and made a rule, like winter backpacking, we just need to do like low miles or find places that we can just go and chill in the woods and in the cold and have fires and drink warm food and eat warm food and drink beer. But yeah, I think moving forward in the wintertime, it's just not the time of the year where you want to like crush miles and, throw on a 28-30 pound pack on your back and just hike 16 and a half miles, because it was definitely less comfortable than not or whatever. So anyway, knocked out another section of the AT that we had never been to. We did find that campsite. It's really cool, and I hope to go back there. It would be a great like quick overnight spot. It's close to where we live, so it would be easy enough just to park, hike up, and kind of camp, and you have really great views and stuff. So keep all those things in mind for the future. And yeah, so another good trip in the books. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one. Later. Hello?